Hello, everyone. This is the 71st edition of Paula Studiolo, and I feel I have just done this yesterday, actually, because I did. So,
Mm.
welcome back to the Studiolo, and I'm so excited to introduce a very good friend of mine who also happens to be incredible artist who is tuning in from Florence, Lady Vittoria Colonna. Victoria, thank you so much for coming to Studiolo.
You're totally welcome. Thank you for having me. Yeah, hello. Hello, everybody. All
You
these
know,
lovely places from around the globe. It's great. Hello.
yes, and I'm sure they can already hear your lovely Irish accent. So, Victoria, how about if we start just by you telling us a bit about you and this incredible life, this Italian and Irish life you have lived so far?
Oh God. I feel like this is almost like a joke. I was born. I'm still like so I was born in Ireland. And my mother's from Galway, and my father is Roman Florentine. And Italy was always a bit of an enigma to me because I grew up with a father with a very, very strong Italian accent, like this in Ireland, and nobody could understand what he says. And so I always felt a bit different being in Ireland because I never felt fully Irish. And then when I did come over here, I never really felt fully Italian. Although obviously my namesake, there was a lot of people who were very angry at me that I wasn't being Italian enough. I kind of grew up on the two worlds, as a feral child in Wicklow in Ireland with her imagination going wild. And then coming here where there was kind of strict rules, a little bit what you were just saying before about professors compared to totally get it. Yeah. There's a certain unspoken rules here or formality that might not exist in other places. So and anyway, and so I've lived in most of my life, I would say I've lived in Ireland. I lived 3 years in Rome when I was 18. I did the Academy of Fine Art. I was going to take the path of being an opera singer, but I do not have the ego of an opera singer. Um, but I do have the ego of a very flamboyant artist, but just not the singers are different. And um, and now I live in Florence after almost 6 years living in Los Angeles, 1 year in London, and for now Florence is my home.
Do you feel at home, or what is home for you?
Oh, that's a really deep, deep question. It sounds like a therapy question to me. Um, what is home? Well, it's true. Home is really where your heart is, and um, I feel divided. I feel um, a part of my soul feels like it's still trapped in California. I would say my mind is here in Italy and my heart could be in Ireland. I feel like there's a triptych pulling me. I think I'm always searching for home. I still haven't found it, to be honest with you.
Yes, and I completely relate to that, of course, right? Because I was born in ex-Yugoslavia and my home doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, the homeland. So when I lived in the US for a long time, my family is there. So when I go to the US, I don't really feel like I belong there either. In Italy, I'm a foreigner. If I go to ex-Yugoslavia, I'm a foreigner there too. So I think really, truly, I think we are where we put our head. And I think as an artistic being, I think that actually suits you quite well because I have a feeling as you go around and you explore the world, I almost feel like you're picking up these almost like pieces of yourself that you find in different cultures, in different traditions. I think that is also influencing your work quite a bit. But before we go into all of your artistic influences, when did you know that you're going to become an artist?
I didn't know how to do anything else. Honestly, I remember as a child, I always remembered I used to believe as a kid that everything I drew or made would come to life. And sometimes I felt really bad because I did really bad sketches. And I thought, like, well, that's okay. There's some bad people in this world too, and they're still alive. I had a very active imagination. And then I realized the moment I was given permission to be one was I remember as a toddler, my sister and I used to share a bedroom, and I remember my mother was very house proud. I mean, she used to upholster all the walls in the finest of Laura Ashley, and like literally, my mother, it was her creative outlet was being the ideal mother and housewife and interior designer there was. And I remember I destroyed her beautiful walls by drawing snails and crazy shapes on it. And instead of reprimanding me, she was like, "Oh, these are fantastic." And I think that was actually, I remember that moment that I probably should have, been in trouble, but instead my parents welcomed it. And so they were quite supportive of it, actually. I mean, I went through phases of being a grunger and trying to do graffiti and very angry art and dark and whatnot. But I think they tolerated it. So I understood that I always felt very comfortable with art. But I also went into many other forms of communication with storytelling. So I went into filmmaking, I was in theater, I was an actor, I did musical theater. When I was in Los Angeles, I started doing a lot of performance art. So I started mixing a lot of things, a lot of creative languages together. So I don't think I'm just one thing, but yes, in the bracket as an artist. But I do have to thank my parents that they tolerated it, celebrated it and tolerated it at times. Yeah. Compared to a lot of people I know whose parents that was never an option for them. But I think given the house I grew in, I was surrounded by creativity. Like my father, he writes, he's quite philosophical. My mother, everything she does is a work of art, everything. Even to watering the plants has to be a work of art. So I grew up in that environment where, presentation was important. What you do with your life is important. My mother used to say, you can be anything in this world, Vittoria, but don't be boring. So I was always encouraged to be a little bit outside of the box. And I'm very thankful of that, especially as I've traveled. And I think that's something I will take with me in this lifetime for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Victoria, I feel very fortunate we actually met you this July and we've become very fast friends.
Yeah.
So I've seen that you can be described as anything else but boring because actually you're one of the most fun people I know because no matter what we do and where we are, you really have this wonderful way to see the world around you and also then transmit that to others. You truly are an artistic soul. And that brings me, to old Victoria Colonna. Can we call her old Victoria? The Renaissance Victoria Colonna. And she was a pretty interesting character. I mean, there is so many wonderful Renaissance women, but Victoria goes to a whole different level. And how do you feel about her?
If you'd asked me this question over 10 years ago, I'd be rolling my eyes going, now I'm kind of going, she's kind of badass. I have a lot of respect for Vittoria. The more, because I have been, especially here in Italy, people always reference her, and at some point it's like, my God, I should really research her, because I always fought her namesake. I found any picture I saw of her, she looked dreary, she looked miserable, she looked extremely severe and serious. She didn't have a very good, she had a very sad, traumatic life, I would say. But then when I started researching, finding out things about her, I was like, God, she pretty much was probably one of the first examples of feminism, I would say. I was very impressed with her in that way. And even last night, what Rami was talking about, even this curiosity to question a faith that she was bestowed, she questioned it. And, she was curious. She was looking for her own truth. And especially in that era, it's a different time. It's in a patriarchal, very strong patriarchal time. And And, I mean, today, I think we are going more into returning to the feminine, to the sacred feminine. That's why I find it fascinating. All these women from the past are kind of rising up from the roots, are coming up. But I found, like, especially that whole conversation with Lutheranism, and then Inquisition into her 25 years after her death. I thought that was quite interesting. So, and it's funny, she does pop up in the most weirdest ways with me. Having her namesake, there is definitely, I carry an energy with that. I can't deny it 100%. And I remember, I think it was about 10 years ago, I was at a pasta and poetry event in Malibu. Carrie, your friend of ours, was doing this. So he would get people from all around. They would come and read poetry, and he passed them. It was for his birthday, and a very elite circle of artists and creatives and whatnot. And I decided I would read a poem of Vittoria Colonna. I got really emotional, like I choked up because I couldn't stop reading her poetry. And I was like, God, this woman was so deep. She was so, yeah, she was not afraid to feel. And as I mentioned yesterday with Rami, when I went to Ischia, to the castello there, I remember going into the room where these nuns would sit, where the dying sister would sit in this room, and they would literally rot away. And sometimes one could sit in that room with them and experience, like, the to remind themselves of mortality and that the flesh is no longer. And she was around that. She was, that's a quite obscure, very traumatic way of experiencing humanity, I would say. I mean, she wasn't, I mean, these are different times again. I think there was a lot more, I mean, death was more evident under your nose in those times, mortality risk, so it's, and she was very privileged, but she, even the fact that she was ordered to remarry, and she said, no, I'm going to keep my dowry and whatever, put it to the church or whatever. But, she was quite an independent soul. She was also a peacekeeper. She was involved with politics. She was, the whisperer. She was in all these creative circles. And as I was saying last night, I laughed because when I was in Ischia, she was referred to as the first lesbian of the Renaissance. And I was like, wow, that's a new one. But, I think there's all these stories and enigma about her. But without doubt, first of all, what poets really make history? There's very few of them, and most of them are men, let alone a woman in these times, so I have a lot of respect for her, and I found a bit more of a lightness. So I suppose her story reminds me to carry lightness. So I'm able to free, and this sounds a bit weird to say, but in a weird way, for me, being lighter, happier, having more freedom in this life, showing more freedom, I'm able to free something for her and all my ancestors that came before me. That I really believe, because I feel like there's a kind of a tikkun, or there's a kind of a correction with all our ancestors that come prior to us, that we have to heal that lineage somehow. So hopefully, maybe somehow, it's not an accident I have her name. It has not been an easy name to carry. It's closed doors in me, it's open doors, it's an interesting one, yet I wouldn't change it. I love the name, and I really am beginning to actually understand and love her, like a distant relative, I guess. Yeah.
Victoria, Laurie Anderson, the artist who I really adore, she said that we die 3 times. And the first time we die is when our heart stops. The second time when we are buried. And the third time when someone says our name for the last time. So I think this is quite interesting that you have her name, and Vittoria Colonna lives on. We're talking today, you're
Yeah.
creating works of art, and her name is still around, and we are talking about her, so she lives on.
Actually, there's a couple of other Vittoria Colonnas, but I've noticed all of them have Maria in front of their name, which I found
Okay.
really interesting. I was like, wow, is there some superstition with the name? Like I said, I even mentioned last night the fact that, I was supposed to be a boy when I was born. There was a lot of expectations as boy, and I was going to be called Chiara. And yet all the men that were called Chiara in my family all died very young. So it was a surprise when I popped out and I was a girl. And it was, they called me Vittoria. But, which is, but any other Vittoria I've met, they always seem to have another name to kind of break it up. Maybe because I don't want to be doomed in this lifetime being, eternally single and miserable and hanging out with, nuns all the time. Although there was a time I did think about becoming a nun when I was 16. I took it serious actually for about 10 days. And then I realized I could still, I have that hermit side to me. I do love going off and disappearing for a month or so and just going off to meditate and pray and talk to the animals and nature. That's my own thing, but I think my service is something else in this life. Yeah.
Sure. And we didn't get a chance to talk about, so many parts of Victoria's life yesterday because I wanted really to focus on Michelangelo because so many of our Studiolo friends are really into art and art world. But there is a moment when she actually goes to a convent and she said, okay, I want to become a nun. And the Pope actually writes to the abbess of this convent and he tells her, welcome her nicely, but under no circumstances you can actually take her in. Otherwise, he will be excommunicated from the church. I mean, it's a very serious letter that the Pope sends to this convent, and of course, they refuse her. So, even though she's unable to really go and live in all these beautiful palazzi and castles that really belong to the family as well, it seems that she's always staying in the convent, staying with the nuns. So she obviously felt good in these environments, and then anyway, I think very fascinating life. But Victoria, if you fast forward a few centuries,
Yeah.
do you have any memories of your maybe great grandmother or anyone
I
who
actually
you
met
would
my great
mention
grandmother. I
who
met
looks
my
like,
great grandmother. She
oh,
was married at 16. And she gave birth to my grandmother Simonette at 18. And I actually met my great grandmother when I think it was 4 or something. She died, I think she might have died when I was 5 years of age of heat stroke in Viareggio, funny enough. And my mother spoke very fondly of her. She said that she really loved um Zia Andrea. We were never, and she was never allowed to be called grandmother. She was only supposed to be called Zia. And I call her aunt. And at the time, she was a very astute businesswoman. I remember hearing stories. She's one of the first women to wear trousers. Drove. She was very smart with real estate, but the husband used to hold her purse because obviously a woman wasn't allowed to have a bank account or have anything of her own. The dowry was looked after by the husband, and it was a set marriage. It was a marriage of, like most aristocrats, they all had set marriages to keep within, their circles. Yet maybe they were never really in love. They both had their lovers and yeah. I won't go into all the scandal, but it's very hard for me not to say the scandal. Because I'm such a storyteller. I love the humanity, and I love that. My God, these grandparents, like they actually really lived it up. And I think today I'm like a little bit kind of really boring compared to them. But she was very close to my father and my aunts and my uncles, and I like the fact that I met her. I feel an affinity with her, and sometimes I see photographs of her and I can see a similarity, you know. But I really wish, she could have lived to 100, 101, 102, and probably I would actually really remember her. But I remembered anyone who's ever spoken of her only had great things to say. She was a character. Yeah.
Victoria, tell us, well, you want to show us your studio? Can you turn around your
Second, I've got
computer so we
interrupt to
can get
a
to see a
nice
little bit
light.
of,
All right, let me say, well, this is the studio that you can see. Well, so I don't know if you can kind of see a little bit. This is a tufting station where I make textile art. And then here's some art pieces. And then it's a real mess because I'm doing a commission for Costa Rica there, and
Can you show us your work in progress, or is that a secret?
it's not ready yet. It's not ready yet. The poor guy himself hasn't seen it yet. So it's on the floor, and I actually can't think straight because it's just kind of speaking to me at times, going, "I'm not happy." So yeah, so I'm actually under the ground of the palazzo. I'm in what was once a bunker, I guess, and I've turned it into an art studio where it's interesting because I love to work with light, like natural light. And then coming to a space like this, I have the epiphany is that I am the light. I have to become the light within the space. And so the work begins to change, and you have this battle with the ego. It's like, no, 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 this is what I want to do. But then the space dictates something else. So you have to work with the environment. And every now and then I have little scorpions running around. So that's the nearest thing I have to nature. But, it's their home too.
So we are in Palazzo Bartolini Salimbeni,
Yeah.
one of the beautiful Florentine palazzi, and I had a great honor to interview your dad in the Palazzo just a few weeks ago. So I will actually link that interview in the email today, which the recording of our talk. But it was really interesting to, first of all, be in the Palazzo that is Renaissance structure,
Yeah.
still so functional and wonderful. And one thing that your dad told me, and I put it actually in the interview, is that when the flood happened in 1966, he was able to see Ferragamo's shoes just
Yeah.
kind of
Oh, wow.
floating by the palazzo because the Ferragamo's home is and his shop was nearby, is nearby. But he said that he waited for a few days for water to subside and to go down in the basement. So basically, where you are now, thinking how he will get all that water out and what he will do. And he was so surprised that all the water was gone. So there is a drainage system that was somehow designed by Baccio D'Agnolo, and he said it's one of the secrets, one of the mysteries of his life. He doesn't know what happened to all of those, incredible amount of water that came because you were so close to the Arno River.
Yeah.
So interesting. You're very in a very interesting space. And how does Florence feel to you? And I ask you this because I lived in Florence for 16 years, and the fact that there is really no trees, the only gardens are bubbly gardens, and you have to pay to get in, and all that gray Pietra Serena, I really felt every once in a while that I had to leave the city and escape to Venice or just get out of town because sometimes the energy of this, even though it is so beautiful and we love it, of course, there's this heavy energy there. And do you pick that up sometimes?
Oh, I do. I do. I mean, it's interesting because I'm very sensitive to energy and locations, and um, I would say that when a place has no culture, and I don't mean saying that with ignorance, I mean because I think every place has its culture, it has its time, it has its, what was its indigenous or what was its time of faith, or like the art here wasn't just made because they loved art. It was to communicate to the people. It's all by church, to communicate stories, and they were commissioned, there was a great amount of innovation. I mean, that changed the world, that happened here. And it stopped and it's frozen. It's like, Firenze, she's a very sophisticated lady with her frozen eggs of the past. And I say, and it's funny because I was journaling about this and it hit me, but there's very little innovation. It's a place that it celebrates the past, but it doesn't give much room to the future unless you're doing a homage to the past constantly. And that can be a little bit frustrating. There's only and maybe that's part of my, I didn't necessarily choose to come to Florence. I just ended up here by accident, and I said, okay, well, I'm here for a reason and I'm staying here, and I feel like there's a part of me to make a certain peace with my bloodline here. And also I know I am an outsider, and I probably get to sprinkle some more, I get to sprinkle my experiences of travel, of a certain maybe expansion or curiosity that sometimes that cannot be, that's not always felt here, or a lot of people don't give themselves permission for that curiosity. At the same time, you know, the innovation can come to a halt because you become lazy, because you look around you, everything is beautiful, and it's like, how can you create with that? Or how can I do something that's, how can I work alongside that? Like right now in Uffizi, there's Joanna Vasconcelos, who's working Pitti in Uffizi, and I love her work, and it just marries so well with the past. So I'm like, okay, well, that's a direction I find really interesting. But yes, the energy is quite stagnant here, and it doesn't flow. It gets trapped. And when you also have a lot of tourism that goes through a place like this, people take. And it takes a little bit of its spirit a bit. And I don't necessarily see something given back. And a lot of locals can be a little bit infuriated by that. They feel a bit frustrated that, you know, it's Airbnb central now in Florence. It's like we're an Italian Walt Disney, a bit like Venice, you know. So there is this frustration. I can feel it with the locals. And at the same time, there is this absolute love and respect from the locals, and they're so proud of where they come from. But then sometimes there's not really this extreme curiosity to leave it. I mean, like, I'll tell you a story. A dear friend of mine, he was born in Florence. He's lived his whole life in Florence. He comes from an old family and whatnot. And he had enough. He wanted to travel the world and go to somewhere that there was nothing, you know, old. And he said, I'm going to go to New Zealand. So off he packed his bags and he went to New Zealand. And he's like, fantastic, in New Zealand, I don't see a sculpture in sight. There's no old buildings. There's, you know, and after about a month, he got so homesick. You know where he used to go? A graveyard. He went to a graveyard, and he would cry in the graveyard because it was the only thing that was over 100 years old. And then he goes like, oh God, I really miss Florence, because that's his environment. So he went back to Florence, and he's literally kissing all the, you know. So, you know, for him, he tried to leave, but Florence pulled him back because that's his roots. For me, I wasn't born here, but I did come here a lot, and I do feel the pull and the call here for sure. But in the end of the day, I'm a nature girl, and I do miss Ireland. I do miss the expansive landscapes, and a place I can go and scream and shout and go wild and crazy without someone thinking, what's she doing? Is she lost it or something? You know, I have to sometimes run off to the Cascina here and hug a tree every now and then, because I do miss where I am. There's no nature. It's, even though there's pockets of it everywhere here. I'm not bashing Florence. I hope to God I'm not. No, because she is a really, for me, she feels like grandmother spirit to me here, for me personally. So the grandmother is kind of, she's firm. She kind of gives you a couple of lessons, but she loves you, you know? So yeah.
And she looks good. She's a very elegant grandmother.
She's a very elegant lady, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Victoria, tell me about, can you share some of your favorite places in the city for us? Because everyone in the group here is very much in love with Florence. So what are your favorites?
Well, I love getting away from all the tourist sites, because it's as a local who lives here now, it's you can't breathe sometimes. So places I love, well, for example, today I was in Santa Rosa. It's a kind of little bistro place. It's outdoors. It feels, I just love it. I love it because it's like it's the other side of the Arno. You just walk that little bit extra out. It's near San Frediano, Santa Rosa. I really love that area. I also love going to the Cascine, which is a huge giant park here, and it's beautiful. And at the end of it, there's a little secret, I think it's called the Ponte Indiano, or it's at the Ponte Indiano. So the Indian Bridge, there is this kind of little cafeteria and also creative art space as well. And I love it's for me, it's like at the end of the pale. It's the end of the world here in Florence, just because it's stopped by water. And I love that place. I'm actually giving away my little secret getaways here. And I love getting lost in bookshops here. Actually, what's happened now, which is very interesting, the Odeon. So I don't know if anybody knows the Odeon, which is one of the most beautiful cinemas I've ever been in. And actually had my film play there once, and I was, it was such an honor. I wasn't even there for the screening, but the fact that I knew the play there, I was very proud of that. And they were going to close down the Odeon, which is very sad. But then the Comuni have now saved it. So they've turned it into a bookshop cinema, something that's never really been done before. So you have this incredible, beautiful cinema, and the floor is just covered in incredible books, and you can sit down in cinema seats and read your book. And then every night there's a movie being screened. And throughout the day, they screen kind of like old black and white film noir pieces, or, the genesis of what cinema was. So I think that's pretty amazing, actually. So there's always little secrets I find here in Florence I find fascinating. And so it has a lot to offer, Yeah.
Interesting. I'm a little bit still perplexed about the Odeon, because I love the big fluffy yellow seats and the slope of the cinema. I haven't been yet to see it
Great.
redone.
I like it. I like it. I
Okay,
think
well, good.
it's actually great to see people in it. I mean, the fact is that I'm still happy people read, and I'm happier if people go to the cinema still, It's they're kind of almost endangered, these art forms, a bit. So, everything to keep them alive, please, So in that
Yes,
way, I think Florence has, they understand culture. They do understand culture, and they respect, and they they look after it here.
yes, yes. Victoria, how about if we open things, maybe questions, if anyone wants to ask you something here. I know we have some artists who are with us today too, so maybe they will actually have questions as creatives who are always observing the life around them. Um, so if anyone wants to come on or put their question in a chat, please feel free to do so, because we never really have living, working artists in the studio. So this is really interesting, and for me, just absolute pleasure. Um, and Victoria, tell me about your influences. Like, where do you pick up the inspiration for your works? And is Florence changing that for you?
Um, it's probably distilling what is already my influence. It's actually testing my tastes. It tests it. I would say, well, I'm deeply influenced by nature, even though my work comes across extremely bright and kaleidoscopic, and almost like I'm trying to burn your retinas, but nature does that too. So I work with the energy of nature. I work somatically with color, and I'm very deeply influenced by certain artists, which would be Nikki St. Fowl. I don't know if anybody knows her. She has the Tower Gardens. I love Nikki St. Fowl. I think she's fabulous. I'm very inspired by native art, South American, African, even Celtic art, symbology. At the moment, I'm kind of going down a wormhole of just having my mind blown about how everything just repeats in patterns all over the world that you cannot escape it. Because I'm always afraid of appropriation. Like, am I taking something that's not my culture and, doing something with it? But at the same time, I feel like that's how the world moves. We exchange ideas and ideas. Like right now, I'm wearing a Maasai bracelet. I love it every time, but I feel the energy of it. I can feel when there's spirit in the art. So Nikki St. Fowl has that. Julian Schnabel is another amazing artist I love. Tamara Delimpicka is someone who's inspired me deeply since I was in art college. Joanna Vasconcelos, huge. And we actually met her here at the Niche Kapur opening. And for me, that was like meeting the Queen or something. I was like, I was blown away by her. I was like the biggest smile in my face, and she was fantastic. They say never meet your heroes. Oh my God, she was amazing. And
Victoria, I want to just interrupt for a second. When
yeah,
you told me about her, I didn't really know anything about her work. I
she's
only saw that there
amazing.
was the opening at Uffizi,
Amazing.
which is quite exceptional in the fact that her work is in the Uffizi and the Pitti Palace, in the
Hello,
rooms
yeah,
like Tribuna of the Uffizi or the Sala Bianca, the white room of the Pitti Palace, to give it to a contemporary artist who
yeah.
has these really imposing, impressive, gigantic works of art. I think it's, truly something I've never seen before. And when you told me about her, you said, "This is Joanna." I thought you were saying, "This is Anish Kapoor." So I thought, I didn't even know who you were meeting, but then we
Love
met
and
her. And
support.
then she gave us so much of her time. I literally think she stayed talking to you for an
Yeah,
hour.
yeah, yeah.
So I think she was as impressed
Works with,
with
and she
you.
works in shamanic ways as well. So she's very inspired by nature and um very, very much inspired by nature. So um yeah, I mean, these are artists, and sometimes there's, artists like this recently. Oh God, I wish I remembered his name. There's a Native American artist I've just come across his work. He's really exciting. Campy chap. I literally discovered him this week, and I'm kind of going down wormholes of his work. He incorporates performance art with Native American of his tribe in kind of mixing computerized language with this really, really interesting, really powerful. And sometimes there's the artists, I don't know their name, but I'm so haunted by their work. That's happened with me with Aboriginal artists when I was in Australia. Actually, in Ibiza this year, I came across a painter whose work was like phenomenal, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I was like, "What is it about the work?" Because it's pretty simple, but it just. I was like, I'll find 15 grand to pay for that piece if I have nowhere to put it, but I really wanted it. It really, really deeply spoke to me. So you don't know where inspiration comes from. You really don't know it, so I think that's, yeah, I would
There are
say.
many questions coming in here, Victoria. So I'm going to just start with the last one I see here. Dr. Joyce
Okay.
Kaufman is asking, I would love to know more about your art, the themes, shapes, colors, politics, or other statements.
Oh, you see Nikki and me. That's the nicest.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I haven't shot any canvases yet. I hopefully I had um what would I say? My influences are, well, actually, it's so funny. I've been trying to articulate it. Believe it or not, if I was to tell you where a lot of my influence comes from, a lot of you might be a bit grossed out, but I'm kind of fascinated by umbilical cords. I'm fascinated by what connects us to the divine. So, and I started working on this when I was about 18. I was fascinated with making big, giant umbilical cords through old pipes and making a telephone to God. Of course, in the Academy of Fine Art in Rome, they did not like this. They're like, no, you do one thing, you choose painting, you choose sculpture, you do this, you do. And I'm like, no, I want to mix it all together. I want to lie down naked in this and have this. They were like, no, 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 girl, you've got one thing and the one thing. So, and then I went into acting. So I got that out of my system. And that's how I got into directing. So I kind of love the idea of having an audience, having an immersive experience. So I would do a lot of performance on. I love that. So my political message, I would say, is just freedom. I'm trying to understand the meaning of freedom, even myself. And I'm a privileged human being in 2023. How privileged am I? I'm born a white woman with the same title as one of the most incredible Renaissance women. And I'm so blessed in this, and yet I'm not fully free. I don't feel fully free. So I'm trying to understand that with my own limitations, with maybe the stories I've learned. Yeah, because sometimes when you have freedom, what do you do with it? That's the other thing. I'm lucky. I'm so aware of how lucky I am, and if I can communicate somehow freedom, and I believe that's also playtime, and I I really find the most freeing people in the world are children. I look at children and I want to go back to that primitive state. I understand Picasso when he went through his, I get it, because I have a niece, she's 3 years of age. And this summer I was working on canvases and I gave her some canvases. And I swear to God, I watched her and I was jealous. She doesn't think, she just feels. And I like to think I feel, and I don't, because I'm still controlling. I'm still attached to certain stories or narratives or what my ego wants or what my ego says what my art is. It should be this. I can't change it possibly now. So that is a bit of a turmoil. I would say definitely our freedom. And also, I would say I am very much an advocate for women in art. That would be what I would probably call sacred feminism. I'm very attracted to the art of textile because it's something that women would have done. My grandmother on my mother's side was a seamstress, and my mother, I saw what she was always making everything. She made her clothes. She used to upholster her own furniture. I've never seen someone so amazingly creative, and there's something about textile which feels kinesthetic. There's something about the material using your hands, both hands, awakens everything in your body, in your mind, in your psyche, and how women used to come together and weave and tell their stories and make tapestries and I think that's important. I think that's even important. We have those circles, we have women's circles, we have those voices, and we're also unique and different, and we come together and we're very powerful when we come together, and maybe there'd be a bit more peace if there was more women involved in more things. What else would I say? Yeah, I think I'm trying to understand humanity, freedom, and quote unquote the word God, love, energy, cosmic beauty, the as above so below. When I was talking about the umbilical cords, the moment the belly button, I did a whole project on belly buttons because they were the symbol of freedom. Because the moment you're cut away from just that simple dot. And from that, I went through this phase of making crazy, like myopic, crazy art pieces and going down wormholes. And then I was doing it again actually last night. I see a lot of similarity of, primitive art, what I'm trying to revise, I guess, and make simple, and that there's no separation between us and our environment and every living or unliving thing. There's animism in everything. I really am conscious of that. So that's a very long-winded answer. It's such a long-winded answer. Yeah.
Second part to the question is interesting that you mentioned wormholes often and compare that to umbilical cords. Are they bridges or portals?
Bridges or portals? I think they're more portals, but that could be a bridge for you in your human experience. I mean, ultimately wormholes, or like they're kind of like being pulled, and the faster you go down these wormholes, the more you go through. I mean, maybe the portals. I'm trying to think of what's the right word. God, I don't know. Maybe portal is the right word. Yeah. Bridges are kind of when you're walking over water or you're walking over something. I feel like I think in a portal you're sucked in. You're going down a slide and you really have no control where you go. Whereas a bridge, you can stop in the middle of the bridge. You can turn back. In portals, you don't. There's a certain gravity that pulls you, which either way, yeah.
Interesting. Angela is asking, would you be willing to show us a piece of yours?
A piece of mine right now. Oh God. Oh, what to do with this conversation?
How about the tapestry behind you, Victoria?
The tapestry, actually, this is an example of what was again the umbilicus. So the belly button. Remember I was talking about the belly button, the kind of center. I love playing around with certain lines. Also, you should know I love snakes. I know people have a phobia of snakes, and I never thought in a million years that I would be working with snakes, and I did, and they taught me a lot. And I realized it was just a progression of what umbilical cords with me was the shape of snakes, and I was like, this is really interesting, and snakes taught me a lot of lessons. So I have a thing that the umbilical cord turned into like snake shapes. So let me see. I don't know if you can see. It's actually supposed to be the other way around. I don't know if you can see this. Let me see. My battery's low. Anyway, but it goes this way, and it's tufted in, and it actually continues at the back. I don't know if you can see it. Unfortunately, the other examples I have this are in a show right now called Shamanka. And I have other pieces, but they're tucked away and they're like 4 meters huge. They're massive. But again, it's this curvature. I mean, I can send pictures afterwards. Yeah, it's just the link between our human experience and the invisible and visible, if that makes sense.
Beautiful. Vittoria, how did you feel about the Anish Kapoor exhibition at the Strozzi?
How do I feel? I think, well, I love Anish Kapoor. I love Anish Kapoor. I love his pieces when, especially in Venice, really powerful. The locations really fit. And I stayed, I think, 3 hours in one of his shows, which was his paintings, a lot of blood. And I was transfixed. I was really transfixed. And then I read up more about his works afterwards. And he has this fascination with trying to understand what it's like to be a woman and giving birth. So I found that quite interesting. A lot of women's reactions going in thought the work was very violent, but my experience of it was, sorry, being crude, but I found it like being in a big menstrual cycle. And I was like, wow, he really got it. I found his work really interesting. He has this, he's trying to tap into that energy. And I think, and he's created this incredible black paint, which is, he's copywritten and whatnot. And he's kind of an illusionist, even what he does with the mirrors and the sounds. And he works with portals, 100%. He goes into other worlds but through simplicity. That's the thing. And that's something I haven't reached yet. Yeah.
Are there any galleries in New York or elsewhere where you're showing?
Where's that? No, in New York, no. I have pieces here in Faf and Tobian Gallery here, and I was just in the Biennale as well. But yeah, I'm in discussions with certain shows in America, in Miami, but we'll see. Because I'm more focusing on a film as well for next year, so that's the other thing as well. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about your upcoming solo show. This is Vanessa, who is also an artist in Arizona.
Where is it? I want to take on these questions. Which
The
one is
first one? The first, but I've been going backwards.
So the show right now it's called Shamanka, which means a female shaman, and practically this textile art. And in the middle of the room there is an installation of suckers, as in chestnut suckers that are cut away from the trees because they suck the life out of the tree. And normally what happens is that they're burnt. And so instead I saved these and I turned them into dream sticks. And what is a dream stick? A dream stick is a sort of wand or a powerful tool that, many of our ancestors in pagan eras would have used, such as druids or whatnot, to incantations, or it's a reminder of your desires and heartfelt wishes. And each stick is made with a lot of love. And the installation is it looks like it's a fire, but it's also a tree, like the tree of life that bursts. So these pieces are like splintered in the room. And so that's now in Florence, and it finishes on the 18th of November.
Also, Vittoria, I wanted to actually ask you, we talked about this yesterday with Remy, and how Michelangelo and Vittoria Colonna used the works of art and their poetry as kind of a tool in their spiritual explorations and their growth. And how about these dream sticks? Would you say they're this very similar thing for you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you have to be it's funny. I think they're a visual reminder of how powerful we are. And I think, words are power. Abracadabra, I create as I speak. So if I create something that I'm making, there's an energy to that. 100%. And I've had really strange experiences happen with, I find elements in nature and I will turn them this is the animism that I'm fascinated. I will give it a character. I know it comes alive and wild things happen. And it actually did scare me a bit. It was like, oh my God, am I practicing witchcraft? Am I, I was like getting freaked out. I was like, no, why am I? I've done nothing wrong. Um, I am, I'm just, I'm just, I'm just awake. I would hope I'm waking up, and it really, you really honor your environment and you honor the earth in that way. So this is my way of giving back, and I know some people, like I actually had a friend of mine, she wanted to learn how to make a dream stick. And so I started teaching her and she was having a really bad day. And I said, well, okay, what is it you want to change in your life? And she started putting it into the stick. And then literally 3 hours left after she was like in tears with happiness. Oh my God, this happened and this happened and this happened. Oh my God. But I was like, but that's already within you. The stick is a reminder of that. So if you have a little shrine somewhere or something that's personal to you, put on the shrine to remember that you have that power within you to create change in your life.
Yes.
So that's I am a big believer in that. Yeah.
And I love, Victoria, that you took one of your dream sticks actually to Rome very recently to give it to someone very
To the
special.
president. Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, it was just after the 7th when the attacks had happened, the kidnappings, and I was I mean, that's a very sensitive thing for me. I mean, I've spent time in Israel. I've over there, and I could foresee what was going to happen. And I remember that night I was, what can you do? I felt a bit helpless, and the next morning, I was going to the Irish Embassy for event because our Taoiseach, which is like our Prime Minister Higgins, was coming. And then I woke up and then I had this message going, you have to give him a dream stick. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give him a dream stick. And I said, but I put all the dream sticks in the show. And then this dream stick popped in my mind. It was green with this red string around it. And I go, there must be one dream stick. I saw it physically and I went down to the studio and lo and behold, it was tucked away in the corner. It was the only one that didn't make it. And it was the one that came in the vision. So I was like, okay, I have to obey this, calling. And it was funny, the moment I carried it out of the studio, I had strange things happen, really interesting encounters. And at one point I was thinking maybe I should give this stick to this woman who's practically on suicidal, you've no idea what happened. I was like, oh God, I have to deal with the message was. And anyway, I ended up going and giving it to them. And he was like, what do I do with it? I said, it's a peace stick. It's a dream stick, Terran peace stick. So it's a reminder that it's a talking stick. So now you have the words of peace. Anyway, he gave it to his wife, and I think she understood. She was like, "Oh, do I give it to people to talk with, to hold and speak with if you want, But it was funny. His bodyguards were like, "What the heck is this?" And they go, "It's a peace stick." And they go, "Ah, sure. Don't we need more of those now?" It was one of those things, but it was just a simple gesture. I'm not changing the world with it, but I'm just reminding someone, hopefully, that you have the talking stick of peace. So that was for me, that was, and also, our Taoiseach is a poet, he writes poetry and he's really cute, actually. He's like he's a character. So I felt that was it was just simple, it wasn't about me. It was like literally I was like, there you go, giving it over. And yeah.
I wanted to, there's some interesting questions coming in, but I want to say, Victoria, Mary Paget, who is also an artist, is asking, are they contemporary Florentine artists you're looking at or dialoguing with, and also how international is the arts community in Florence?
That's a very, you know what, I'm still looking for them, honestly. So I'm going to move over here because my laptop is about to die. So to answer your question, I would say that well, actually there's one artist I adore who's in Bologna. I think she's incredible. Her name is Francesca Pasquali, and it's funny, I met her here in Florence. I still have her photograph of her artwork on my WhatsApp, and I had it like, I don't know, 10 years. And I've never got rid of her. And then I met her here and I heard her name and I was like, oh, are you the Francesca Pasquale? And she's like, yes. And I go, look, I've got your artwork on my phone. And we became really good friends. And I love what she does. And I think she's incredible. In Florence, there's more artisans, and there's a lot of incredible artisans. There's a great community of them. But the artists I would know probably they're either, they're in the Charles Cecil, they're in the Florence Academy. They're painting like the great masters. I don't know many abstract expressionists here, or actually there's Felice Limosani, who's quite interesting. Who's got an installation here in the Palazzo, and I find his work really interesting. But they're not the easiest to break through to, the artists here, personally speaking. They're quite protective, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think another kind of this Florentine spirit. But I think as far as the international community goes, I think there's so many art students who are coming from around the world who make Florence their home, at least for a little bit. And I have a feeling, Giorgio Vasari used to say, I think it's still, who is it, the Life of Perugino, maybe. He says, the artists should not stay in Florence too long because Florence will do with it as the time does with everyone, which is, it will just kind of recycle them and they will be forgotten and kind of in the past. So
It's
interesting. I think,
vampiric. Florence is a little bit vampira. It's
yes,
a little
yes,
vampiric
yes,
for
yes.
sure.
Victoria,
Um,
there's a great question in the chat. If
yeah.
you could take a look, it's quite long, so maybe you can pick up
Where is
from it
this?
what
That's,
is.
oh, is it from Cynthia?
Yes, yes,
Should look
because
into the third and the links. Oh, oh, is that by Tyrrell, is it? Tyrrell, I'm just going to invade Stephen umbilical cord. The contemporary artist is Agatha tuning works in Milan is only Marco, and I have acquired 3 of his works. Wow. The snakes you mentioned are prevalent in the history of the intersection between danger, death, and birth, such as Maria. So I love this. Oh, thank you. That's brilliant. Well, it's funny. You know what? If I had my pet snake, I would have shown you all her. She was so cute. She died. But I'll tell you one thing. I think this is interesting about the snakes because I'm sure people must think like I'm a total. But it's interesting. Snakes are one of the most healing creatures you'll ever meet. Like because they're so somatic. They're so sensitive and they feel everything. They're practically blind. They're deaf. They go blind when they start to shed. They go through a very painful process of shedding. So in order to grow, they have to shed the past away, which I think is such a beautiful metaphor. And I find them actually really relaxing because if you're nervous around a snake, you'll know it, like most animals. But with them, the breathing changes, like you become very intuitive, very somatic. So they've taught me a lot of lessons. And I did a lot of people who were snake phobias. I used to work with them with snakes and they completely changed. It was like it was incredible, really, really amazing experience. And they're a symbol of death as well, Ouroboros. And I will check that out. Thank you so much.
Victoria, thank you. Can you believe that an hour went by and we have covered we only scratched the surface of things that you can share with us. Um, Thank you for coming to the studio. It was really a pleasure to have you. And I guess 2 things I wanted to end with. One is I think I'm going to start this tradition of having every guest in the studio leaving
That's
a
the best.
question for the guest coming in.
Yeah.
So my next guest is Professor Tracy Cooper, and she will be talking about Venetian women artists who were completely forgotten. And Save Venice, this nonprofit based in the US, is now have this. They have a great campaign to raise funds to restore works of art by women, and by restoring them, they will hopefully also restore their name and biographies back in the place. So you're a woman artist, and I thought this is actually really lovely to create these links between my speakers who sometimes are completely come from very different backgrounds. So, what would you leave as a question to our next guest?
I think what the first thing that's coming to mind about I think it's fantastic with these women of the past, but I think how can you incorporate that with women of today? Like, how can you use that as a way to inspire women and bring, regardless if they're artists or not, or children even, like somehow to involve them in an initiative like that? Like, for example, I would say with the Joanna Vasconcelos, like look at that marriage of contemporary art and past art. And would there be ever, I don't know, a kind of an open conversation about incorporating contemporary female voices um, with the ones of the past? I don't know how that could be. That could be a very abstract idea. It could be setting up a, you know, it could be setting up, I don't know, a microphone to the silence of the past. But I don't know. It's something that incorporates it in a contemporary way, that it brings awareness to the past and also awareness, like have the issues, are they different? Like, what does it mean to be a woman artist? I mean, really, I think that's you know, even like asking someone what is being an artist, it's such a, it almost is a very charged title to be called an artist. I'm only starting to feel comfortable calling myself an artist, but I know nothing else. But I feel like it's something you have to earn through pain and suffering, which I want to get rid of that narrative out the door. But I feel like all this work to keep these pieces and bring awareness to these past artists, but how can we bring that into a contemporary sense? So
Yes.
I don't know if that makes the question that I'm very curious about.
Yes, yes. And I love this. Vanessa said, my dad told me it was a privilege being an artist. It is a privilege. So, which actually ties up to my next question is what you ultimately hope to achieve with your work, Victoria, with the creations you will do.
Oh, I will
I know
love.
this is a tough one.
um, I have there's certain dream projects I want to do. One of which I'm working on. I've been working on for a good couple of years, and it's a movie about a woman I deeply love and respect, one of the greatest artists of all time. Um, and I feel that's it's a huge undertaking, and but I want to tell her story because I think it's important. I'm being very cryptic about this, but hopefully you all see it one day. Um, that will be another studiolo maybe one time when I can talk openly about that. But at the moment, it's a little bit, it's like I can't say I'm pregnant yet. It's that kind of you're conceiving. So there's that project, which will be told in the language of cinema. Um, and then there is also, I have a dream, yes, of doing like installation work and actually following through this umbilical cord idea. There's one thing I've always wanted to do. It sounds wild. I I don't know if I should actually say this or not, but I think if I get to do this project, which actually scares me, and it requires a lot of physical health, of being suspended by a big giant umbilical cord of about 20 feet in certain locations, and being in the placenta of this piece attached to sacred sites, singing opera.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know it sounds wild, but it's something and it would just, and the fact is, it's a bit like, I don't know if anybody's ever read the book The Night Circus. The Night Circus was a book I came across years ago, and when I read it, I was like, that's what I want to do. It's this kind of surprise. You don't know when the performance, it just pops up. It's not planned, no one knows about it. It's just set up. It's a bit like Philibert, what's his name, the man on the tightrope, walking tightrope. He thought it was so beautiful, he wanted to walk between the twin towers. Not as extreme as that, but there's certain locations I would love to do, to have an experience of doing this as a human installation, and do a whole series of works around that. And I can't believe I just said this publicly open, but I have a couple of documents of like 50 pages of research and how can I do this, and I've already started inquiring, and I was trying to get people on board to do this, and And then it kind of fell away to the side, but every now and then it pops up and I'm like, oh, I really want to do that before I leave this world. I would love to do something that's way bigger than little old me. And that's something that's just so beautiful that if it moves me, I think it would move other people. I would hope. That's it. Sense of
Victoria, thank you. We already have become that people can't wait. So thank you for sharing it with us. I hope that all of your dreams and your inspirations come true and become beautiful, inspiring works of art because you truly are an inspiring human being. And I'm really happy that we have done this wonderful conversation. So thank you for coming to the studio, Lo. And I will wait to welcome you again when the movie comes out and when you are basically this huge umbilical cord singing opera. So we will.
I better do it while I'm still youngish,
Yes,
and
yes, you
happy
are.
because a lot of training for this. I think, yeah. Actually, maybe I will start getting. Anyway, that will
Yes.
be another conversation. Thank you so much to everybody. I would have loved to say hello to everybody. I find it very boring to talk about myself all the time. It's a bit too much, but especially all these other artists, incredible like faces I see everywhere.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for everything.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you ever come into Florence,
Thank you. It's
Grazie mille.
Yeah.
Grazie. And I will see everyone in the studio next Saturday with Professor Tracy Cooper. We will talk about Venetian female artists and what they're trying to do with this project. And of course, Victoria, I will follow up with your question, which I think is absolutely brilliant, which even made me think about the guest I had just a few weeks ago, James Bradburn from Brera Gallery. And he did an amazing job, which was actually really brilliant, to put the labels on the works of art, but labels written by other artists, by artists from different cultures, or even authors like Sarah Dunant. So imagine if a work of art by, let's say, Julia Lama is restored, and when it is now back in the museum or hanging somewhere where people can see it, if a female artist, contemporary artist, gets to write a label about it, wouldn't that be so
interesting.
lovely to just such an interesting, very, at the end, very cheap way to connect the two worlds and have this dialogue going. So brilliant question. So thank you so much, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.
Aloha.
Aloha. Arrivederci.
Ciao ragazzi, ciao a tutti, ciao. Ciao.